Yes, sir. There we go. Thank you for joining me this morning, Dr. Jamie.
Man, that is so cool. The whole experience of just getting to the show is
Yeah.
almost as I think as exciting as the show itself. Countdown, like my heart started racing. I'm like, oh my god, what's happening?
Yeah. I was trying to do a little something for the folks that's paying attention. So this whole thing, as I mentioned, is all about education and entertaining the folks. And I created it with this idea that if people found new understanding and concept that they've never known or didn't understand a lot about, then they would get rewarded for doing so. So for those that's focusing in on the content with this particular piece, what we're gonna do is offer you $25. You know how to get it though. You got to go to my YouTube. My name is my
Cash
name
money?
everywhere.
You talking about cash money?
Yeah. So my name is my name everywhere at YouTube, DeAndre Rudis. If you subscribe, if you like, if you share, and then comment something that you learned by watching this particular piece of content that you didn't know previously to watching it, then you're eligible for that 25. So that's gas money, maybe some food or dinner for tonight, whatever. But you know the rules. That's the way you get it. I choose a person at random. So for those that's going to click on this link now and watch it live or watch it later, you got your opportunity. I just want to educate the community, and we're doing this all 2024. That said, I got my big brother here, my mentor. We met during the doctoral process at the Chicago School, and it's been a journey for the both of us in learning and going through the doctoral journey. But having somebody like Dr. Jamie help me tremendously. And I'm looking forward to having this conversation because this is something that I know we encounter in our community, being that we are a community of nonprofits. And I think this applies largely to the nonprofit community, but I do understand that this particular topic can be found elsewhere. So,
Yeah.
looking forward to learning. I don't know a whole lot, so I'm gonna learn alongside y'all, and I hope y'all found a lot of um, information useful that you'll be getting from Dr. Jamie. And so, with that, I'd like to bring in Dr. Jamie. And before we get into the conversation, I always ask my experts, Dr. Jamie, what makes you an expert?
Ooh. Well, you don't start with the soft questions. You go right to the thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I remember back when I started the doctorate program back in 2019, but I've been on this journey for quite a bit longer. But I remember they said that, getting your doctorate really means that you become an expert in something. And I remember sitting with my friends in our residency in Chicago. We both went to the Chicago school. And I kind of looked around and I thought, well, what am I going to be an expert in? And at the time, I had really only spent any time in the literature around the topic of employee engagement. In fact, I like to say, like, this is something that I do. First of all, I really loved having you on my podcast. I'm so honored to be on yours. I always ask people, like, who are the theorists that you'd like to have a conversation with, living or dead? And up until that point, I was really only very interested and knew a lot about William Kahn from Boston University and his work on employee engagement. And that really connected to, I'm putting that together for the first time, that really connected to my work at the time. When I entered the program, I had been for 10 years, up until the pandemic, a regional executive director for one of the largest hospitality conglomerates. And my first and probably my primary project was helping employees at every level, from the executives all the way down to the associate level, front guest-facing associates, with employee engagement. And William Kahn is the author, or the father of employee engagement. And I remember thinking, I was pretty insecure about my ability to start over and research something, because I studied that in my master's program, my graduate program, and I thought I was going to just completely take that project and move it over to the doctorate program. So your question of what does it mean to be an expert? I have spent, they say, according to one of my favorite books, Dissertation Destination, it takes 1,078 hours to complete a doctorate, to complete a dissertation. And I thought I better start counting those hours if it's 1,078.
Man.
And I lost track somewhere around the 900s. I stopped caring about it. But to be an expert means I have read, I have touched probably everything that has been written on my topic since it's ever been written.
Wow.
So from 1992 till 2023, I have an intimate relationship with all of the theorists, have an understanding of what they did, how they did it. And it's interesting because my topic, founder syndrome, and we can talk about that. I'm looking forward to unpacking that. There is not a lot written about it. So, I'm an expert about all of the things in this very small niche sort of research construct. That's what I think it means to be an expert. And but I also live the experience. So there's that.
Okay. So at this point, you've put in over 1,000 hours because you stopped counting at 900 something.
Yeah.
So 1,000 hours on this particular topic, and that makes you a de facto expert. That's for sure.
Yeah.
So to that point, then that segues right into the first question, which is, can you provide an overview of your dissertation topic on founder syndrome?
Yeah, an overview. So at a very high level, I was trying. I struggled. I think we talked about this a little bit in the episode that you were on my podcast. Is I struggled a bit thinking that I had to find the literature. And I remember that there was a big aha that you had about going to leverage the librarian. So I wasted a lot of time trying, thinking like I needed to find like it was an Easter egg hunt, find all the articles on the topic. And also we talked a lot about, the importance of choosing your dissertation chair and how crucial that is. So when I chose my chair, I chose my chair based on my interest at the time, which was employee engagement, as I just said. And I was interested in pursuing a quantitative research topic because, I just thought, surveys are easy, nice and clean. But what I found as I got into the research and as my literature review revealed, the most compelling question, the question next to ask, was actually a qualitative research. And so now I had a quandary because my chair was someone who was an expert in quantitative research. And she was advising me from that lens. And so I kept trying to fit myself into that lens. And namely, she was telling me to, critique the literature. And I was standing there with like a handful of literature. Like my entire dissertation is built on how many articles would you guess my entire research is built on?
Being that it's not thoroughly researched yet, 30.
17.
Wow. 17. Wow.
So for the longest time, I felt like I didn't have enough. So I kept looking for more. And what I eventually discovered, and it took me like maybe a year to realize that I had stumbled into a gap. So at a high level, once I realized that I had so few articles, 17 articles, 10 theoretical articles, and 7 empirical articles. And in the empirical set, there's only 2 quantitative articles. The rest of them are qualitative articles.
Yeah.
Right? So 10 theoretical articles, 7 empirical articles, and only 2 of them were quantitative. So I sort of reached out to who I had discovered who was the eminent author on the topic, Stephen Block. And I sent an email, and I didn't think and I didn't think I'd ever hear from him. And it took
Mm.
maybe about a month, and then I did. And I felt like when you meet somebody famous, I felt like,
Yeah, for sure.
this person's talking to me.
Yeah.
And I asked him, like, there's very little written on the topic. I'm trying to find the gap. Where do you suggest I go?
Mm-hmm.
And Dr. Block suggested that he told me that he had a book coming out in 2023. He's retired.
Mm-hmm.
And that he had a new theory called Founders Transformational Reaction Syndrome. So there's founder syndrome, and we can talk about founder syndrome in a second, but he talked about like founders transformational reaction syndrome, and that it was a theory that he was positing in his book, and that no one had ever tested the theory. And would I like to test it? And I thought, Yahtzee, of course, I'd love to test that. So founder syndrome first starts with the idea of the person who founds an organization. It used to be thought of founder syndrome as happening in the for-profit sector and also the nonprofit sector. But certainly between 1992 and 1998, by 1998, the literature had shifted and is focusing founder syndrome as a phenomenon that occurs predominantly and exclusively in nonprofits. And here's the reason why. Because it's really looking at the power, the uneven power, the way that founders wield their power in organizations. So if you look at a founder in a for-profit organization versus a founder in a nonprofit organization, you see some very distinct differences, right? So, and I always use, and I talk about this in my dissertation, I use Steve Jobs. So the market in the for-profit sector, the market will correct for a founder who isn't behaving properly in some way. So when the board of directors decided that Steve Jobs was not fit, they removed him from his own company.
Yeah.
Right. So that's the market coming into. So that's how come the literature has shifted that founder syndrome is a phenomenon that occurs in nonprofit organizations, because it doesn't exist as a syndrome in for-profit organizations because the market will correct.
Right.
In nonprofit organizations, nonprofit settings, the founder is generally a person who is committed to a cause, is sympathetic to that cause. However, they may not have any of the business acumen required to scale the business or the organization once it reaches a certain critical mass. In other words, once a nonprofit reaches the point where a board needs to be convened, then the whole business shifts. So it's this problem called the agency principle problem. When the founder creates the organization, the founder is the principal. They're the one, they are like any other CEO. They started the organization, it's their baby. They named it, they gave it its look and all of that. But when a nonprofit reaches the point where they're really doing sort of big business, and the crux of the matter, what I discovered that I didn't know when I started this, is that there is very little difference between a for-profit entity and a nonprofit entity. They really operate the same.
Yeah, just tax status.
So go ahead.
No, I was saying just tax status.
Yeah, it's really just the tax status.
Yeah.
And there used to be this big difference between employees in these sectors in terms of their earning potential. And that's sort of erased, meaning if you are an accountant working in the for-profit sector, you're making about the same amount in an organization that's a nonprofit, meaning, right? So I sort of lost my thought, but here the crux of the matter is, in nonprofit settings, the founder is here. I picked it up. The founder is someone who is committed to the cause, but they may not actually have the business
capability.
So they convene a board, and at that point, When you get to the point where you have to, when you're convening a board, that means the organization is scaled. That means that you have donors or grants, that you have some responsibility for reporting out what your outcomes are.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, the founder becomes subordinate. The founder changes from being the principal to being an agent.
Mm-hmm.
And really, who's in charge, who owns the organization, who owns the entity at that point, are the board members. The board members are the legal owners of the organization. In fact, the organization actually does not belong to the founder. The organization belongs to the community.
Right. So, and let me be clear about this. This is the distinction between nonprofit and for-profit, and what you're saying in terms of the ownership now being in the hands of the board is for the nonprofit.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
That also happens in for-profit organizations too. When a board is convened, the board are the owners and the shareholders are the owners, right?
Right.
That's the difference when you go from private to public.
Right. Okay. Right.
A lot of founders have this mentality of, this is my organization.
Mm-hmm.
It's not your organization. It belongs to the community. But the thing is, founders tend to, and as the research suggests, tend to recruit board members from within their personal networks.
You can say that again.
It becomes a sort of, I'm sure you've seen that in your work.
Man, I think that's the problem with what we have going on in the community today.
Yeah. And these now, can you imagine the board of directors for Apple or any other major company being recruited from among people who don't know what they're doing, who don't really understand business, who don't have...
man, you talking. You just got the rush of thought that just came over me about, again. So obviously, I do community-based work. Mm-hmm. I'm surrounded by nothing but nonprofit organizations. Mm-hmm. We don't have a business environment. And a lot of these people don't have a clue as to how to properly operate. Now, because they are connected politically and socially, they have the means to go get the capital to fund the organizations. And that in and of itself is their indicator that they can get the job done. But in reality, that does nothing but stifle what our community could potentially become. And like you said, all of the folks that sits on boards, they all kick it with each other. Mm-hmm. They're not going outside their own networks to go find anybody that could be subject matter experts that could actually develop these organizations.
Now, there's nothing really inherently wrong with a founder choosing people from among people in their personal professional set. The problem is the people that they recruit often don't understand what their responsibilities are, and the founder doesn't transition ownership. And so there becomes this sort of cronyism, or they genuflect to the founder in ways that are problematic. And the thing that I found out that was the most disturbing, and it was that I saw it in the literature and I actually saw it in my own personal experience. This dissertation, this subject, this topic came out of a horrible experience that I had. And we can talk about that. But what I found in the literature that I was seeing at work is that in certain organizations where founders are dealing with founder syndrome, the founder is the last word in the board meeting minutes.
Interesting. That's interesting.
So there's a secretary that takes recording of the meetings. Then the founder has the last word where they can edit things out or in based on their own desires.
Interesting. Now, why do you think that is something that is important? Is that a tactic used to continue to control the organization? What's the benefit of having the last word?
It is absolutely a tactic. It's absolutely, because those records become the official documentation of the organization. So the founder can edit things in and out And
Mm-hmm.
usually the board doesn't look at the minutes anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And those minutes are eligible. Like anybody in the community, any citizen can ask for the for any of the documents of a nonprofit. And so
Mm-hmm.
the founder can curate exactly what they want
Mm.
in the official records.
In curating what they want. So are you saying that they could potentially hide evidence, facts, or add just their own spin on things to make things seem as if they're performing, they're operationally performing better than they actually are, worse than they are, things like that, that could, essentially lead to skewed outcomes, if you will.
I'm saying that the possibility exists, and it does. We have research that demonstrates it.
Wow.
The possibility exists that the founder can do whatever they want. And when we're talking about founders dealing in terms of facing or confronting or struggling with founder syndrome, that's exactly what's happening. They are on one end, they are editing out things that make them look bad, and on the
Mm-hmm.
far end, they are perhaps changing things according to the research. Occupational the word occupational embezzlement or occupational fraud. That's the word. Occupational fraud is at an all-time high in nonprofit organizations. I saw it myself, and I see it in the research. The average occupational fraud in nonprofit organizations, first 39% of the fraud that happens in nonprofits, the highest, by the way,
Mm-hmm.
is being generated or being caused or created or perpetuated by founders. And
Wow.
it's around $250,000 is the median.
Wow.
So process that.
Yeah. Wow.
You think about the average small to medium, SME, small, medium enterprise nonprofits, which most qualify for.
Mm-hmm.
They're less than 50 employees, and
Mm-hmm.
they're about $2 million in budget.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yep.
that's really on the high side, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
It
more
is.
likely around 250, around $1 million is sort of like a baseline of the budget of the organizations that we're talking about. A quarter, 25% of their budget is being hijacked by occupational fraud.
Wow.
Because the board members don't understand finance,
Mm-hmm.
they don't understand reporting, and there is things like double dipping or check fraud, and I certainly saw that
Mm-hmm.
happening at the level of $250,000.
Yeah. I will say this. I had the pleasure of sitting on the board this past year, and I subsequently got off that board once I realized that there were a bunch of things that were happening that could
Mm-hmm.
land us in legal trouble.
Mm-hmm.
Similar to what you're saying. Now, this wasn't more or less a founder's issue because the founder has since passed for that particular organization. But that board, though, that board not understanding proper reporting, not being able to have anyone of financial acuity to sit in that primary position of treasurer that could really lend their subject matter expertise in the proper manner. I had to look at it for what it is. It was a great opportunity and something that I really relished and wanted to be a part of to help develop this organization. Because as you said, we were leaders of the organization, but looking at it from that perspective of me knowing that at some point we may get called legally to defend decisions that
Absolutely.
this organization have made and people have made on behalf of this organization. I don't want no parts of that. So I had to get up out
Absolutely.
of there. Mm-hmm.
And you could be called to defend something that occurred when you weren't even on the board.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. For sure. So we got one question that got dropped in the chat.
Oh, okay.
What tools would you use to combat
Wait a minute. This
occupational fraud?
is super live where people are asking questions.
Oh man, we here, baby.
Wow. Okay.
He said, "Let me get ready."
I kind of saw. I'm trying not to. I'm trying to like be present.
Yeah.
So like things moving. I'm not looking at.
No,
Oh,
that's me. I'm controlling.
okay.
I got the boards. You don't have to worry about the boards.
Okay. So let's
So
talk about
yes.
occupational fraud. One way to combat occupational fraud, first of all, is to make sure that the people who are on the board are qualified, that the board's meetings are evaluated and certified by the board after the fact, and that there is sort of an audit that is occurring with some distance. That the person who's auditing the organization isn't a part of the organization, is somehow related to the organization in some way.
Yeah.
That's one. And when you feel something, when something feels not right in the organization, you want to look around, and are there measures to report something? Is there a whistleblower a measure? Is there an organization or a place that you can call to anonymously report things that you suspect? An area that I particularly found interesting, that I think is I found in my personal experience, and I also heard from the people that I interviewed, around gift cards.
Gift cards, huh?
Gift cards. So it's not uncommon that an organization donates to a nonprofit gift cards. It's a clean, easy way to incentivize things. It's like a petty cash, right? Okay.
Yeah.
So it's not uncommon that fraudulent founders take those gift cards and use them in ways, not only use them in ways that were not intended, but use them supposedly to buy things for the organization, acting as if it's their credit card, and then turning in an expense report.
Wow.
Or they get reimbursed for money that they stole.
Right. I hear that. I hear that. Wow. That is very interesting. That sounds, again, the nonprofit that I sat on, there were some things like this that were potentially happening. It would have been great to have had leaned on you, like, hey man, what do you think about this? Because I do think some of those type of things were actually happening. Very interesting. I'm glad you are bringing that up. So we're saying we have to have proper reporting, auditing. We have to have competent individuals that sit on these boards that essentially have some intuition about the work that they're involved in to pursue whatever challenges that they see arising as it relates to those reporting measures and some of the other things that are coming up. Anything else that you'd suggest in terms of occupational fraud?
Well, one of the things that we kind of know about founders in nonprofits is that we haven't sort of transitioned to what I actually research. We're really talking about founder syndrome, which is in the background of what I research. The thing that Block told me to look at is founders transformational reaction syndrome.
Okay.
So as Royce is saying, you absolutely have to find the right people on the board. Not only do you have to find the right people, but there needs to be term limits.
Yeah.
We know that in organizations.
His question, I'll say this. His question is, how do you find the right people?
Oh, how do you? Okay.
Yeah, but I'm gonna let you keep going, and we'll circle back to that.
They need to have term limits. We know that organizations where the founder is the leader, they tend not to have term limits, meaning people sit on the board for an interminable amount of time. In organizations where the founder is not the leader, when the founder has transitioned, about 5 to 6 years, founders should transition. The board should have an official way to orient new members. They should be always looking for new members. And there should be a way to prepare potential board members for board service. And they should cycle out about every 2 to 3 years. You can come back, but you should leave after 2 to 3 years.
Can I add as an IO, because he's saying, how do you find the right people? I'm all about competency analysis, and actually creating a system by which you can vet people that comes into your organization based off benchmarking from other organizations that have done it right. So if you're looking for a person that's been in finance that's going to be in charge of your books, we benchmark against some of the organizations that know how to get it right. And that way we can get a checklist of these are the things that we're looking for. This is the type of experience and service and education you should have, and so on and so forth in terms of all of the positions. So that's just me throwing that out there for Royce, because as an IO, that's something that we use to bring people into the mix.
Yeah, it's a little bit outside of my research area, but it occurs to me that, because we both put on our IO hat, right, that this is really about selection, and we need all of the same criteria for selecting someone for volunteer service as we do for, for employment.
For employment, for sure. Yep. Not just, you're available and I want to bring you in because you have the time. Like, no, you actually have to vet these people as if they're going to get a job, because it's a job. It's a volunteer job that hopefully you don't put so much on them that they feel like they're working 40 hours a week. Right.
But it's a job. Actually sometimes end up paying to do. Some boards have a requirement that board members have to contribute a certain amount every year to the annual budget. So it's a big job.
So we had a response. Tony says, this is eye-opening. Our CFO has often spoken up about the issue of accepting gift cards. What we have also found that some churches prefer to give this way and also won't support certain stores that are uncomfortable supporting for whatever reason, and thus will buy gift cards from an organization or store that they want to support, and then they'll give them to us.
Right.
Yeah.
What I think is I hope what's beginning to happen is, at least in one of my respondents talked about how a founder used gift cards for their own enrichment.
Right.
Paying for child support certainly doesn't cover what the organization.
Wow. Child support?
Child support.
Wow. That's crazy.
Or luxury items like large televisions and things like that. What I guess I want to let people know is, if you have an organization that is using this method of donating gift cards, they are highly traceable. Some founders didn't know that. So they were able to trace where the
point of sale,
what they bought. And so again, if you think about the founders being able to edit things in and out of the board minutes, this is exactly why they would do that.
So let's get back to the research then. And I don't know if this question is similar to some things you may have shared, or hopefully it can touch on some other things that have come from the research. But I want to say, what would you say are some common symptoms or manifestations of founder syndrome that you discovered in the research?
Yeah. This is interesting. I'll talk about my experience and how that connects. Is when the founder has an unusual preoccupation and ownership of the organization. When they talk about it as my organization. When everybody around them talks about the organization as their organization. There's this unhealthy attachment to the organization, that they become merged with the organization, their identity. Another sign is, when you look around the organization, do you see the founder's likeness everywhere? Is it unusually high? Does the founder spend a lot of time doing press where they're continually talking about themselves in the organization, or exalting themselves with the mission of the organization? That's a sign. Those are some of the signs.
Mm-hmm.
And particularly, it's almost a given that after a certain amount of time, like 8 or 10 years, if the founder's still in place, there's probably some founder syndrome going on.
Mm-hmm. So I'm gonna use that to segue into the next question, which is, why is it important for organizations to understand founder syndrome?
Okay, so this is where I think we can talk about what I actually studied. So founder syndrome is the background. Founder syndrome is the power, the uneven power that founders wield in organizations in problematic ways. If we were just talking about founders, I think this could be a simple phenomenon.
Mm-hmm.
What we're actually talking about is, how do people in the organization respond to the founder?
Mm-hmm.
So that's founder's transformational reaction syndrome.
Mm-hmm.
So in reaction to a founder who is exhibiting these behaviors, first, it's not usual that someone walks up to someone that they just met. So I started this organization, and I looked at the founder, and I had like an instinct, something didn't feel right, but I don't know. It's my first day.
Mm-hmm.
But within a week, those things kept sort of piling on, and I kept having this instinct that something's not right.
Mm-hmm.
I was starting to doubt my own experience, and so founder's transformation reaction syndrome is, and it borrows from Freud's reaction syndrome that says what people do to suppress a negative feeling about something, they suppress it and they adopt an opposite positive feeling about something.
Mm.
So here I was having all of these doubts about the founder within the first week, within like the first 2 days.
Mm-hmm.
But I kept pushing it down, going, well, it must be me. It must be me. And telling the founder that I believe in them, I trust in them, I'm there to help forward the mission. And then as time wore on, that pressure, and I sort of think of it as like a trash compactor. One day, a little feather hit the trash compactor and it exploded. So what's important is to understand that there are some sort of similar ideas around founder syndrome. An associated construct in founder syndrome is corporate psychopath.
Now you got to elaborate. Corporate psychopath.
Psychopath is someone who has, psychopathic tendencies. They show very little empathy. They have sort of criminal enterprise intentions and abilities. And if they were operating sort of outside of a corporate environment, we might call them a mobster.
Oh, you ain't talking about these organizations on the West Side?
Oh, yes, I am. I'm not talking about just the organization on the West Side. I'm talking about the ones in the upper crust.
Yeah, right? Absolutely.
So they take that same mentality and they put it inside organizations where they use narcissism and the other things in the dark triad.
Dark triad.
Yes, Machiavellianism and charm. They're incredibly charming. They are disarmingly charming. And what I found is, they start off as charming, and that's what was going on with me. And all of a sudden, it goes from charming to alarming. And I agree that it can absolutely be downright life-threatening. As I left the organization, in my entire life, I have never, ever, ever had security in my house, an alarm system with cameras.
Mm.
After I left that organization, I installed cameras in my house because
Wow.
what I saw, the fraud was so much that I wondered, blowing the whistle on that, if my
Yeah.
life was in danger.
Wow. Yeah. Wow. Mm. Wow. Wow. And so this is obviously the genesis of what led you down the path to want to discover this whole syndrome. And so transformational reactionary syndrome is the real threat or the real study, if you will. And so to that point, then how did it show up in other folks that you
Okay.
had a conversation with?
All right. So here's how I conceptualized it working. We
Mm,
have something called authority bias, where someone in charge, we the people who are the followers, there's the leader and the follower, right?
mhm.
The followers look to the leader and think, well, they must know what they're talking about. They're the leader.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Mhm.
So you defer to the
Mhm.
leader, even if you think maybe that's not right. We see
Right.
this often in the medical field, where an attending doctor, um, the residents may view that the attending doctor, who maybe is advanced in years, but they're totally respected, is making a call for a patient, and they are somehow out of step with the current medicine. But none of the
Mhm.
residents speak up
Right. Right. Right.
because they're
That's an
afraid
appeal
of
to authority.
embarrassment. They're afraid
Mhm.
of they can't possibly have anything to contribute. So
Mhm.
it works first with authority bias. So they are borrowing from this sort of archetype of being in charge. Then we have
Mhm.
founders syndrome,
Mhm.
where you're not sure if it's really happening because
Mhm.
they're so charming, and there's the
Mhm.
dark triad going on.
Mhm.
Uh, and then there's you, the individual, having founders transformational reaction syndrome, stuffing down your
Mhm.
experience.
Mhm.
So that's how this whole thing works.
Mhm.
And I think that what's interesting that Block talks about in his book, and I certainly found in the folks that I interviewed, this very same sort of enculturation. This they start off believing in the founder, respecting the
Mhm.
founder. They
Mhm.
start to suspect that something is wrong, and
Mhm.
they stuff it down until one day a feather lands.
Mhm.
And then
Mhm.
all of the time that they believed or faced, put it on the face that,
Mhm.
I believe in you, I don't suspect you, and all of a sudden there's this sort of almost like a vigilante
Yeah.
who now has to right the wrong of the founder, and they also feel duped.
Mhm.
I felt incredibly. I I've been a consultant, an organizational consultant for 25 years. I'm a pretty good judge of
Wow.
character.
Yeah. Yeah.
This
Yeah.
founder, I didn't listen to my first instinct, as Maya Angelou said.
Mhm.
When people tell you who they are,
Hmm. What you say?
believe them the first time. The
Yeah.
first time.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
first time
Yeah.
it went sideways. I
Yeah.
went, oh, no, that's not it. And then it went sideways. But now then we're talking about the I forget what fallacy this is. It's when sunken cost fallacy.
Mhm.
I know your work in your podcast also talks about investment, where you're
Mhm.
chasing an investment that is not performing because you've already invested so much in it.
Right. 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 Yep.
It's the same concept.
Yep. Psychologically, it's gonna get back. It's gonna come back. So
And
I'm gonna keep doing it instead of just checking out of it.
you know what the worst actual here's the most predictable signal of founder syndrome
Mhm.
is when the organization has crashed in some way,
Mhm.
and the founder led them out of the crash.
Mm. Mm. Now everybody feels like, oh, this person is who we thought they
They
were.
know how to lead us out of the crash.
Right.
But the secret is they caused the crash.
They caused the crash. Right. Exactly.
So they're
Exactly.
causing the
And
crash,
you're
and
probably not out the crash. All they did was went to the board documents and covered up what they done did to not only get there, but to actually move some things around to get you out of there too. I understand that. So you did a qualitative study in which you interviewed different folks, and you refer to the feather as the thing that causes things to explode. I don't know if this is okay with the research, but can you share at least like one response to the feather, like, or what that feather was?
I'll try to remember it. There were many times. Sometimes the feather came at the very beginning. One of my participants talked about as they were moving into their office, as the founder was sort of moving out. They were putting their things out of the box onto the shelves, and the founder was putting them back in the box.
Okay. What are we doing here?
The feather came in ways where the founder made inappropriate hiring decisions, where all of a sudden there is some person that shows up that we didn't even know we were hiring somebody for. And oh, by the way, this person is wholly inappropriate. And it's in my research. I think it's in my research. I'll just say that this person was wholly inappropriate because of their lifestyle and what was publicly available about them, particularly when they were working in this population of children and disadvantaged people. This person should not have been hired. The feather came in ways where one participant said that they knew that the founder was hiding the fact that there was a large endowment that could have perpetuated the organization for decades. And they were underpaying their employees while the founder was saying, we'll make it better one day. And they knew that there was like a $3 million endowment.
Yeah.
That not only does the public not know about, but they're not telling the employees.
Wow. Man, like I think similar to you, again, with me having more limited board experience, but being a part and seeing how people are in positions of leadership and how and it wasn't again the founder, but I everything you're saying is something that I experienced, even to the fact that I experienced not listening to my own intuition and essentially being blinded by a person's charm when, I, as a psychologist, pride myself on recognizing behaviors and understanding that the decisions and actions that one takes on is a combination of like who they are. That is that person. And I'm grateful for the experience that I had in this past year, because I'll never let that happen again. Right. And it really will help fuel me as a person that can make better sound decisions about people and their character. And so to that end, we have to come to some recognition of who the person is in front of us. And that's but one thing. And so I want to transition to this question here. And I only got a couple more questions for you. So I appreciate you being patient with me. Let me do this disclaimer. So again, for those that's watching, we doing this thing all year 2024. Not every time, but some of the time we'll be giving away some money, some items and things like that. If you've already watched this content, you've known that I had a business consultant come on. I paid her to give an hour worth of consulting time to somebody. I bought some nice sweaters from somebody in the community. I raffled one of those off. Right now, we got $25 that we're giving out. So if you're watching, go on that YouTube, subscribe to my channel. My name is my name everywhere. Share the content, like the content, and comment something that you learned that you did not know before you watched this content. And I pick you at random, and the 25 is yours. Gas money, lunch, dinner tonight. I don't know. Do what you will with it. But that's how I'm blessing the community, educating, entertaining, and trying to pull a few dollars in your pocket or give you some item or something from somebody in the community. Either way, I wanted to just transition into these last couple questions. So again, as I was setting it up, I was saying, being able to identify the person, even go with your gut about what you are experiencing can help you in cases where you feel like you're experiencing founder syndrome or transformation reactionary syndrome. And so to the point, I want to ask, what other advice would you offer to organizations or individuals who may be grappling with founder syndrome or founders transformational reactionary syndrome based on your research findings?
Okay, that's a great question. All right, so I'll answer that question by talking about the themes that emerged. Well, first of all, I interviewed 8 participants. About their average age was 46. Their average tenure in the organization was a little bit less than 4 years. However, the organizations that they come from, the tenure of the founder was average 21 years.
Wow.
Okay.
Yeah.
So my questions were, well, how do nonprofit employees characterize their opinions of the nonprofit founder's suitability to lead the organization beyond the startup phase? Clearly, these organizations are way beyond the startup phase, 21 years, right? So 3 things emerge from that question. 1, the founder appears to always need to be in control. That's 1. 2, the founders become polarizing figures in the organization, meaning they just separate, divide, and conquer the organization, where some people are for them and some people are against them. And they are maintaining this balance of divisiveness. And that divisiveness is operational or instrumental to them maintaining their control. 3, they start to promote unsustainable organizational practices or procedures. They put things in place that people who have business acumen would say, that is not sustainable. They're unpredictable and they don't follow through. And if you challenge them or question them, all hell breaks loose.
Wow.
Okay. So now those are the questions. So then I asked them, how do you recall your initial opinions of the founder? There are 2 themes that emerge. They started off, as I said, being charming, being incredibly charmed by the founder. Charm is the currency of founders and founder syndrome. That's how they attract donors. That's how they attract employees. That's how they attract board members, through charm. But eventually, and not so eventually, if you look at the tenure, 3 years, that charm becomes alarming. So it goes from charming to alarming. And I asked them, how do they describe their evolved opinions? Now that I know who you are, how do I deal with it? Well, then they grapple with, is this a reason that is this a person that I have to avoid? I have to stay in the organization. Maybe I don't have other job prospects right now. Do I have to avoid this person? So they create these elaborate structures to avoid dealing with the founder. Or is this the reason why I should leave? So they're in and out. So they're straddling the line. And then the last question is, how do employees deal with their well-informed opinions? Well, the way to create the reaction that I got, which was surprising, it didn't exist anywhere in the literature. It had to do with healthy boundaries. Establishing healthy boundaries, understanding that instinct inside you was a boundary and that had been crossed. And the founder is sort of taking advantage of some certain archetypes. authority bias, as I said.
Mm-hmm.
They might even be taking advantage of sort of a leader or savior messiah archetype, or
Mm-hmm.
mother, father, grandmother, grandfather archetype. And people, what you have to understand, and I can end it here, is they are taking, founders who are dealing with this, they're taking advantage of some great quality in someone else and using it to their benefit.
Mm. Wow. Mm.
So the advice I
Yeah.
would offer is to
Mm-hmm.
speak up often,
Mm-hmm.
and bring the issue, if not to the board chair, bring
Mm-hmm.
it. There are organizations in every municipality that are responsible. You can actually also bring it to the FBI.
Or I also know that you could do our state's attorney, secretary general. Am I saying that right? I can't
Secretary
think.
of State,
No,
or
not the secretary. I'm thinking of our attorney
Attorney
general,
General,
attorney general,
State's
the
Attorney.
attorney general. Yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, that makes me think about some things, actually about my current work, that everything that you said is essentially manifesting itself. And
Mhm.
I will say too, not knowing the literature that you research, part of the repercussions of founder syndrome is turnover.
There's high turnover. The
Very high
attrition
turnover.
is high.
Yep.
People, it's a revolving door.
Yep. Yep. And again, like I say, I'm dealing with some of that in the work that I'm doing now. And I think what you've done is really created a lane for educating folks and improving organizations in and of itself. So I feel like we have an opportunity to partner if people will be open. And I'm saying that, being I'm based in Chicago and you're in LA,
San Diego.
San Diego.
Yeah,
Thank you. Thank
don't
you.
put me in LA.
Uh, at San Diego, but I just, because we are dealing with this at such a high level in the community, you know, and there's just a lot of opportunity here. And I'm glad that you added the 18th piece of literature to the research.
Yeah,
Nobody better than you. Yeah.
I'm the top of the food chain right now on my topic.
Oh man, that's awesome. That's awesome and amazing. I hope to be able to express the same, which I feel like I will. Obviously, being that SciCap is limited, and I'll become the
Mhm.
subject matter expert
Yeah.
and be able to go around and talk about this. You know, I think the other thing is these boards, man, and that's a whole nother topic for a whole nother
Mm.
day. But those boards are so critical to these type of instances with founder syndrome and occupational fraud and some of these other concepts that we brought up today. And we have to figure out how to get the right people on these boards and
Mhm.
get them educated and understanding that what their roles are and how they are the actual stewards of these organizations and can
Mhm.
make them better if they make the right decisions. But like you said, if they're handpicked by the founder, that becomes even more difficult, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There needs to be the same level of control,
Yeah.
financial control, and I would actually argue that even more control, because the money that's coming in isn't doesn't belong to the founder. It's other people's
For the
money.
people, yeah. Yeah. It's
So
for the
there
people
needs
that
to
you
be
serve, period.
so, like, I have a consulting company. You have, like, how I
Mhm.
spend my money in my consulting company is my own business. Nobody
Mm.
gets to tell me that
Right.
while I'm private. If I go public, then
Right.
they that's different. And nonprofit organizations are public.
They're public.
They're
Exactly.
public entities.
Yep. And they operate so private, man. Again, we can have a conversation on that. I feel like that skews more into some of the community advocacy that I'll get into. And I get real passionate because I just know how much we're leaving on the table, if you will, with having some of the people in
Not only are
place
they
that we have.
public, but they actually they are extensions of the government. That's why they have that's why the tax benefit, the tax,
Mm.
they are doing work that
Yeah.
really the government would do, and the government is authorizing them to do that and extending to them that same privilege of tax benefits.
That is a very interesting way of looking at it. I've never heard anyone put it in that way, but I like the thought of that. And
Mhm.
I'm gonna be sharing that. I'm gonna be like, man, you know you're a government, you know you're extension of the government, man. Why you acting
Mhm,
like this, man? You
mhm.
know. But anywho, so I am going to go ahead and exit stage left. I'm gonna give you the ISO screen. So if you'd like to, whatever you'd like to say, so that the folks can remember exactly who you are, find your research, contact you in whatever way, hopefully offer you some money so you can rid their organization of founder syndrome, whatever you'd like to say. I'm gonna ISO screen you and give you that opportunity now.
Okay. Well, my name is Dr. Jaimes McNeal. I am in San Diego, California. Currently, I'm in the process. In fact, in like days, my new website will launch. But currently, you can find me on LinkedIn. It's Jaimes McNeal, McNeal. Uh, all the things that I'm doing and working on are available on my LinkedIn page. And certainly within a couple days, I will be announcing my website. There's also a podcast I call the Your Adjunct Professor podcast. And Dr. DeAndre Rudis, soon to be, was one of my guests. And so that's another place that you can find me. So thank you so much for this opportunity. It's been great. It's been a while since I talked about my research, so I really appreciate the opportunity. Thanks.
Thanks, Dr. Jamie. I appreciate you coming on. I appreciate you all for tuning in. It's fairly early in the morning, and we had a quite a few people tapped in and giving us questions and everything like that and feedback. So thank you all so much. And again, as I exit, just want to once again promote this is something we're doing the whole year: education, entertainment, and some form of compensation for just learning. I really want to give back to the community in a different type of way, and this is one of those ways. And
Yeah,
so I got a bunch of friends.
I'm so
They do
proud of you. This
they
is
do some
awesome.
amazing things. No, thank you. I know they do some amazing things, and y'all have to learn about these amazing things. So that's my only hope is that somebody goes to my YouTube. DeAndre is my name, DeAndre Rudis. Subscribe, share it with somebody, like the content, and then comment something that you did not know that you learned by watching the content. And I got $25 for you. So once again, I appreciate y'all and stay dry. Okay, I don't know. Anyway,
Yeah.
oh, it's running.
Stay dry is
Oh,
really for us. We're
okay.
atmospheric rivers right now. So yes, stay dry.
Yeah, true indeed. Yeah, and be safe, brother. I appreciate you once again coming
Thank you
on.
so much.
And like you like to say in closing, class dismissed.